Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Living with Crohn's Live with me. I'm Sherry Lip. I am the creator of Happy Gut for Life, and I'm so happy to be talking to you today. Today, I'm going to be answering some of my most frequently asked questions about the SCD diet. And if you have questions and you're here live, you can ask them in the comments, in the chat. And if you're watching this later, feel free to ask in the comments if you have any questions or comments about these topics or a new topic about SCD that I didn't cover here today. Because I love to hear from you. And, I'm always happy to answer questions and give my thoughts. So the first question is that I get a lot from people who are newer is actually, what is the SCD diet? So I've been doing it so long and kind of it's second nature to me. I barely even think about it, but it's a good question because some people don't know what it is. Especially if you've been newly diagnosed with IBD or you know somebody who's thinking about it, or people have mentioned it, but you don't really know much about it. So the SCD diet stands for the Specific Carbohydrate Diet. It was invented is a weird word for diet, but it was came up with. I did a short little video. You can find it on this channel, and I'll post a link to in the comments about kind of an overview of what it is, because it started a long time ago, way back in the 50s, when Elaine Gottschall, who wrote Breaking the Vicious Cycle, which is the book. If you're thinking about, this is an older version. There is a newer one. If you're thinking about it, you should definitely get that book and read it. That's always my advice. Don't just look online and go off of that. You really need the original source. So in the 50s, the author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle, her daughter had ulcerative colitis, and it was very, very severe, and she was faced with losing her colon. She was only like 8 or 9 years old. So her parents were not wanting to have to do that. So they found a doctor, Dr. Sidney Haas, and he had been treating people with celiac disease with removing starches and gluten, having a special diet. Before at that point, they didn't really know that gluten was the problem with people with celiac. So children died often from it, or they just lived very miserable lives. So he had come up with this diet way back in like the 20s. So they might have known by that point about the celiac by the time Elaine Gottschall visited him with her daughter. But back in the 20s, he had invented this. They call it the banana diet because the kids ate a lot of bananas to get calories and nutrition, and it was a safe food for them to eat. Well, they removed a bunch of starches. So that was the germ of it. Elaine Gottschall's daughter recovered from her ulcerative colitis and became healthy again by following this special diet. And so Elaine decided that she would spend her life researching the effect of food on people with digestive issues like IBD. And so that's what she did. And she wrote this book, and it was published in its current form as Breaking the Vicious Cycle in 1994. I think 94 or 95. And that's when this movement that's continuing now started. So that's how it started. So the thing with Breaking the Vicious Cycle is that it's a singular book. I kind of wish there was more, like maybe that more had been written and published, because that is the difficulty in kind of being a proponent of this diet. It's not accepted in the medical community yet, although there are many studies, which I think I mentioned in a previous broadcast. So in a nutshell, here's what it is. The Specific Carbohydrate Diet is not a low-carb diet, is not a no-carb diet, is specific, as the name implies. So we eliminate grains, gluten, sugar, processed foods. Those are the big ones. And we develop a diet based on fruits, vegetables, meat, some legumes if you can handle it. That's one that some people have trouble with when they have IBD. And it's mostly just a whole foods diet that eliminates grains and sugar. I mean, if you want to really boil it down in a nutshell, that is what it is. And so you learn to cook with things like almond flour. When I started, that was very foreign to these days with keto and paleo and stuff. That's actually become a lot more common. So it's easy to find these ingredients that used to be super specialty these days. And actually people don't really think of it as strange anymore as they once did when I first started. So that's been kind of a good thing about it. About the new movement, about paleo and keto, regardless of what you think about those diets, having those around has been helpful for us on SCD. So yeah, that's boiling it down into its essence. We're eliminating those things: grains, sugars, gluten, processed foods, a few other things like corn, and specific carbohydrate diet, because there are some starchy vegetables that are allowed and some that are not. And that's where the book is very useful, because it can be hard to keep track of them. And so that's what it is. And I definitely encourage anybody who's looking into it, definitely get breaking the vicious cycle. Do your research. Don't just jump right in. Definitely get to know it a little bit before you start. So the next biggest question I get that kind of ties into that is, how long do I follow it? I think that's the question I had when I first started, and it's not all that answerable because it's very individual. So for me, I decided to start with 30 days. That's in the book. Even that's like what they tell you to do, what she tells you to do, to see if it's helping. Now, some people, they don't get a lot of help in the first 30 days, but they continue and then they see some improvement. So I think it's really how you feel. So that's the short term. You want to try it for 30 days. When I hit my 30 days, I was feeling better, so I went for the year, which I talk about in my my SCD diet story video. And then what you want to do is, then it's hard to say. Some people want to continue it forever, and that is totally fine. Some people, me included, were kind of wanted to expand diet. So in my mind, if you've committed to it and you're feeling good, I say 2 years. Get yourself very healthy before you think about adding other foods. And in my mind too, avoiding those processed foods, sugar, refined, like weed and refined sugar and stuff like that is probably going to be beneficial to you. But what you eat is your decision. That's my opinion on it, is that I have felt better. I tried to introduce some, kind of like what we would call cheat foods, and that didn't work out. But I have been able to introduce some other whole foods, healthy foods, as we would say, like quinoa and plantains and sweet potatoes. Those are kind of my main ones, into my diet as a regular part of my diet. But I definitely would say get symptom free before we think about how long. If we're making the commitment, that would be my recommendation. So it's not a definitive answer, because everybody is different. I think that's the one thing we have to accept about ourselves. Even our illnesses, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease are not the same disease, just in different parts of our body. If we do some research, I don't have the specifics, but there are different T cell counts and different things going on with inflammation in those two diseases. So, and we are all individual. When you see the commercials about Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, you'll see they'll be like severe, moderate to or mild to moderate, and then there's severe. And so we're all experiencing it in a different way. To think about that before they embark and have the whole family do it for one person. I get wanting to support somebody, especially when you're talking about children. But really think, especially if you have more than one child, if it's, a mom and a dad and a child and they want to support them, that's one thing. But when you have more than one child and the other ones don't have these issues, I really suggest thinking about if you want those other children to be as strict in the diet, and really research it and think about what is going to be best for them, because a restrictive diet can be tough emotionally. I've talked about that a lot. I'll probably talk about it in depth a little more in a future broadcast, but we want kids to develop a good relationship with food. So your kid with IBD is going to have a different relationship with food than your kid who doesn't have IBD. And I think that we really need to think about that, do some research on restrictive diets in children and orthorexia. That's a term you might want to look up if you're thinking about doing it as a whole family. Maybe you can kind of work out a way to do it that feels fair and good and healthy for all your children. Maybe it is doing it all the way for everybody, but really think about it first. It's healthy enough, you can get the right nutrients, but it takes work, just like with any diet, to get all the nutrients you need and all the healthful things that you need. And also, but let's not discount enjoying our food. We can't say just because we have an illness that we no longer care about enjoying food, because it's just not emotionally possible. So that is why, if you do have other children and you're thinking about doing SCD as a family, really give it a lot of thought and talk to your family and talk to your kids and talk to all your kids about how that would work and how everybody feels about it, because we're all individual in our needs for food. And so it's a very important topic to me, that we are very careful about how we enter into something that is, that can be restrictive. Because restrictive dieting can lead to some disordered eating. And we want kids not to develop a fear of food, but a good relationship with it and what is best for them. So what's best for one may not be best for another. Just something to think about when you're entering into it, and if you're having your whole family do it. My other question that I get the most is more a personal one for me, and that is whether or not I am on medications. I am not on medications, and I haven't been since I had surgery, except for one time, but I've never been on a biologic. I'm not on any supplements, but me not being on medication doesn't mean somebody else won't need it. But that is my absolute most frequent question, is whether or not I am on medication. So no, I'm not. But I always advise people to work with their doctors. Never quit your medication. If you're thinking about doing the diet without supervision of your doctor, that can be very dangerous. I'll tell you a true story. When I first started getting into blogging about this, there was another person who had also, when I got into it, I had been doing it for a long time. But there was another person who was newer to the blogging world, and she had just gotten diagnosed, and she was on biologic, but then she decided she wanted to try out SCD Diet. And so her doctor didn't support it, which we'll probably find a lot of, but she quit her medication. Cold turkey. Do not do that. So she quit her medication. She didn't really get into ill health from it, but as she was trying to work out her diet, she went into very severe flare. I mean, she had just been diagnosed and after having severe symptoms, and she decided not to do medication. She went against her doctor's advice, and so he kicked her out as a patient. And then she ended up in a very, 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 very severe flare. And she didn't know what to do. And felt like she couldn't go back to her doctor because she was embarrassed and it felt like she had messed up. And so she ordered biologic from Canada. I don't know how that works, and I don't really want to know, but she did it. And then she didn't know the dosage. And so she just got sicker and sicker. And then, she ended up in the hospital. So just, when we're thinking about being in control of our own health, we need to be careful. So we're always, I'm never telling anybody to not work with a medical professional. And if you want to try to get off your biologic, if you're on one, that's something you should work with a doctor with. And like I said in my last broadcast, if you are having, you're not getting what you want from a doctor, maybe try to get another doctor, which is what I did. I think that's our best route, but we don't want to start messing around, especially when we're messing around with, medication. Another true story, is somebody contacted me. They've been doing SCD. They weren't on a medication, but that had been doctor supervised, but they started SCD, and they wrote to me like, when is this going to work? Well, the symptoms they described to me were very familiar because it's when I had a complete bowel blockage before my surgery. And so she was describing some symptoms that I recognized from that. And I said, you need to get checked out. This is not the diet not working yet. This could be a serious problem. So she wrote to me a couple weeks later and said, thank you so much. I went to the hospital. I didn't have a full blockage, but I had a partial one. And so we had to get that out of there, and now the diet is, doing much better for me. But if you have a bowel blockage, that can be very dangerous. So I want people to know that paying attention to our symptoms is very important, and let's not just attribute everything to die off. So there's another question: what is die off when we're talking about the SCD diet? So when we change our diet a lot, it's not just with SCD; it's just in general. When we change our diet, our body is changing and adjusting to what it was used to. And if we were eating a lot of carbs, and if we were eating sugar a lot, and then we cut that out suddenly, our system is going to react because it was used to having that. So it might not feel well. So what die-off actually is, it's like kind of flu-like. You feel off, you feel tired, you're achy, your stomach might be a little bit upset. But what it is not is like super severe pain. If you're having bad abdominal pain, that is not die-off. If you are throwing up, severe diarrhea, you might have a little upset stomach, but I'm talking, severe, like you cannot eat anything. Then we need to get checked out by a doctor, or especially if there's any bleeding or anything like that. That is the time where we're not thinking, well, I just got to wait for the diet to work. At least get checked out, know we're okay, and then move on and figure out what foods are right for us. So those are my biggest questions about SCD. It's mostly what it is, getting started. I'm going to do a separate video on some specifics about getting started. I went over that a little bit in my previous video about my SCD diet story. So I will do like kind of a more technical regular video, not a live, about getting started with SCD and kind of some methods and best practices soon. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Please give this video a like if this was helpful content to you. That helps me know that I'm on, giving you information that you want, but especially leaving me a comment or sending me a message if you don't want to do it publicly on one of my social media channels. I would love to hear from you. I love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for watching. And if you're watching later, thank you too. And I will see you next week. I don't have my topic picked for next week yet. I have a couple things in mind. And I also have a special announcement coming. So please stay tuned for next week's topic, and I will see you then. And like you said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, put them in the comments. Thanks, everybody.